The remarkable Boatwright sisters, August, May, and June, must have created a symphony of conversation in your head when you were bringing their dialogue to life on the page.
This is an interesting story for me because I had no idea how this was going to unfold. All I knew was that I had this girl, I had this stand in mother, and I had this father who was not much of a father at all. He was abusive in many ways to Lily. And I knew that Lily would go on an adventure. And it's kind of the opposite of Huck Finn, taking off. And except this is a female journey. And so I remember being in the car one evening in the passenger seat with my head back, kind of thinking about the story as we were driving somewhere. And it hit me out of nowhere. What if Rosaline was jailed because of a racial incident perpetrated on her, but she ends up being beaten and jailed? And what if Lily breaks her out of jail and they take off on this adventure? Now, it seemed so preposterous to me at the time, a 14-year-old breaking her out of jail, that I said to my husband, do you have a tablet in the car? I want to write something down. And I wrote down a note that I still have and I keep on my desk, which says, Sue. I wrote a note a little letter. Sue, this is a very good idea. Don't dismiss it later. I know you're going to try to dismiss it. Don't do it. It's a good idea. And I signed my name, right? And it's a good thing I did. And I smile at that now because I knew that rationally I would try to talk myself out of an audacious kind of thing like that. But we need to err on the side of being audacious as writers sometimes and to follow that impulse that comes when you're half asleep and your head is back and the imagination, kind of the doors open, and there it is. So we trust it. We have to trust it.
Such wonderful advice. I'm curious how often in the middle of the night these lovely ladies, or Lily and Rosaline, woke you up with something to say that couldn't wait till morning and you had to write it down right then.
I usually sit on the side of the bed with a legal pad and a pen and a flashlight. Now I've progressed to one of those clip-on night lights things that I hook onto my notebook. But I do wake up and make notes, yeah. And that's how I discovered the Boatwright sisters, actually.
Please share.
Yeah. Well, I wrote up to the point where Lily and Rosaline take off, but I had no idea where they were going. And it was kind of a little literary crisis for me because I thought, oh no, I think I've just hit a dead end. And I had a collage. Now, this is another story, but one thing I do for every novel is to create a collage before I start writing.
Please tell us more about that visualization process.
It's a very old-fashioned thing, but I believe in how story emerges out of visual imagery. It does for me. So I put down on this collage all of these images that struck me. All I knew at that point was that I had Lily and the bees and Rosaline, and I created this collage. Well, one of the things in the collage that I was attracted to, I think our unconscious is hooking these things, you see. So one thing I put in the collage was a big pink house. There weren't any bees really in it, but there were 3 African-American women, kind of like a trio standing together. And they sort of looked a little bit like sisters. They could have been. I didn't know who they were. I just cut them out of a magazine, pasted them on. And one night I was so flustered in a way, creatively, by the fact that I had no idea where Lily and Rosaline were going. They're off on an adventure in South Carolina in 1964 with nowhere to go. That I was sitting on the side of the bed and this time I got up, I went to my writing study, I looked at that collage, I sat there before it, kind of half meditating really, And I looked at those sisters and I thought, what if, you see that word again, very important, 2 words. What if they ended up at the home of these 3 African American sisters? Now, who are they? And I decided just like that, they kept bees because bees were, I wanted them to continue to be a kind of iconic symbolism in the story. So I thought, okay, they're going to the home, that pink house of these 3 African American sisters who keep bees. There it is. So I wrote to that. When Lily and Rosaline arrived at the pink house, I needed one of the sisters to be resistant. I needed the conflict.
Sure.
So we had these 3 women. They needed to have very different personalities to be wholly themselves and unique and recognizable and have their own way. So I had the wise woman, August. She's kind of an archetypal wise woman. Then I had June, the fiery one that, wore the NAACP t-shirt and was the resistant one. And what does this girl want? And then May, who was the most unique one of all. She's kind of a damaged character. She has one of these permeable souls that the whole world rushes into, and she can't, and there are reasons for this in her character. So there they were. And what I do is I sound out the dialogue. I talk it out loud. It has to have a certain rhythm, tone, flow. It just has to feel right. I go by feeling more than anything. And I practice talking out loud until I get their voice. And then, it tends to come more easily.
How much research did you do into the art and profession of beekeeping? You bring it to life so vividly in this book.
Well, you would think that our family would have become beekeepers because of all this, but of course we did not. I didn't know a single thing about beekeeping. And really, for all the bees I lived with all those years in the house, I didn't know really much about bees either, except they could sting your fiance in the middle of the night. I knew that I needed to get to an apiary immediately. I read a lot of books about bees and honey making, but it wasn't until I went to a honey farm that it all came alive for me. They took me out to the hives and I heard this unearthly sound, just this whirring in the air. And it was beautiful. It was just like the song of the universe, And I stood there and the bees, they took the lid off and the bees just kind of boiled out of this. And there's no substitute for that when you're researching, or when you walk in the honey house and your shoes stick to the floor because of the honey and the scent of it all. So you need, I think, these firsthand experiences whenever possible to get the sensory experience of all that to complement what you're reading. And that's kind of what I did.
When we get to the place in this beloved story where Lily finally comes face to face with the truth about her mother's death, that's quite a revelation for both her and the readers. How long before Lily did you know?
I did not know how this book was going to end until I was about 2/3 of the way through, and I started to get a little anxious about how it would end. It was my first novel, and I was learning by writing this book. And I had this idea in my head that, this is so pretentious, but I had this idea that to be really literary, it had to have a tragic ending. So I was kind of going down that road. And that meant for me that Lily would have to return to her father, but different, but changed. And then a remarkable thing happened, and I've never had this happen to me since, although I would wish it. I had a dream at night when I was asleep. And in the dream, August came to me. She appeared in my dream, just as I pictured her in my head as I wrote her character.
Wow.
And she put her hands on her hips. I mean, she was very angry with me. And she shook her finger in my face and she said, "You must let Lily stay with her mother's." I woke up electrified. And how I understood that was that something in me knew the right ending, but I was fighting it. So sometimes, even a dream can inform your story. It's so we have to kind of have our antennas up for these things, for the authentic way this needs to end. And that's how it came to me. I understood then she was staying with the boat rights. And the minute I understood it, it was such relief in me because I didn't want her to go back to Sylvan, to this father. But it seemed so, again, preposterous. Could I justify that? How could that be? So sometimes these ideas that seem to take great leaps and be astonishing even to us, we're hesitant about them, but sometimes we just need to take the leap with them. So that's how it happened.
And what an incredible journey you, Lily, and company went on getting to the end of this story. Tying the gift that this book was together with the perfect title, The Secret Life of Bees. When did that first start buzzing around in your mind?
Well, the title, The Secret Life of Bees, came to me kind of spontaneously. The minute I realized that there were bees in that wall and that I grew up in a house where there was this secret life going on behind the wall, it just seemed kind of like organically there, the title. Now, I have a kind of craziness about me when it comes to titles, which is I can't really start writing until I have it. I don't recommend this at all, but I can't seem to help myself about this. And I'll tell you why, because once I get the title, it is the focusing point for me to write to. And I love it to be something both concrete and evocative, symbolic. And I want it to inform the story in a way that is enlightening to people, So I can't even start until I get that. And I will write them down on a legal pad over and over and over until I find them. But with this one, it just came to me before I even had to do that. And then I feel like, okay, now I can start writing. I know the story. And then that title will pop up somewhere in the story and I write around it.